Welcome back to Drive Driver Driven. My name is Humble, and today we're going to work on the Honda for a little bit. I'm giving the Ultima a break. It knows what it's done. Really what I want to do is get some work in on the Honda, get something done, get some project finished, and something that I can get on the track sooner than later. And if that's the Honda, so be it. Today, getting a little work done on, up in the nose and on the corners. Let me show you what I've been working on here. Up in the front, got things torn apart a little bit. I'm actually fitting a new intake. I know I said I wasn't going to do a whole bunch of power mods. I don't really count this. One of the things I wanted to do is some dress-up mods, basic intake and exhaust. Not too much, not go real crazy with it. Eventually, I'll pull the motor and rebuild it. But again, nothing crazy. I just want to keep it either a stock K20 or maybe bumped up to a K24, but no turbos or power adders or anything like that. The intake I got was, you'll see these cheapy Tegua intakes that have sort of an intake box, a carbon intake box. It comes up through here with an intake over the cowl here underneath the wipers. Well, on right-hand drive cars, the wipers are reversed, so they're on this side, and there's a nice opening here where you can just slap it in. But on US and rest of world cars, the wipers are on this side, so I'll have to work around this area a little bit. But this is actually the Group M intake. This is the OG that's made in Japan. So for, again, right-hand drive panels, they have this nice cowl piece that's in fiberglass that you can put in place. And then again, this is our little scoop that sits on top of it that would normally sit right here. And then this guy is our actual intake box that would sit up in that opening. And then this is how the scoop works, is it actually sits here and then redirects air down into the air box. This is the nice Group M piece. Very beautiful carbon work that's reinforced with fiberglass, as you can see on the inside. And that sits down in there with the nice heat shield, kind of keeping things a little bit cooler, at least protecting it from the exhaust heat. And so that needs a little bit of work up in this area, pulling some of these pipes out of the way, or at least tucking them back a little bit further so I can A, hide them, and B, keep them out of the way of the intake. But I need to be able to remove the wipers, which are absolutely rusted in place. And I don't have a wiper puller tool that's on the way, so I've kind of stopped mid-process here, and I'll just wait for those to arrive so I can get these wiper arms pulled, and then we can complete this process. So since I'm kind of stuck there, that's kind of the story of my life at the moment, unfinished projects, I moved on to the rear, where I am doing a 5-lug conversion. So on the EP3, it's basically a shared platform with the Honda Element, the DC5, or the Acura RSX, or the RSX Type S. There was the EP3, and there's one other that I'm forgetting. But all these cars basically shared the same suspension underneath, and you can more or less swap evenly between all of them. So you can have a completely slammed track-worthy Honda Element, or you could have a lifted EP3 if you want, just by moving things around. So what I've done is on the EP3, the early years had a 4-lug setup, which you can see on the front here. This is the stock early gen car 4-lug. And then on the, I think it's the 04, 05 models, there was a mid-year facelift, both in headlight, tail light, little things here and there. So then in the later gen cars, they switched everything to 5-lug. So I believe the EP3 used basically the base RSX parts, but you could swap in RSX Type S bits as an upgrade. And that's sort of what I'm doing here. Is I have RSX Type S rotor. I've already put the 5-lug conversion hub on with a new axle nut. You can already see a new rear suspension arm that I've put into place and the new sway bars that I installed earlier. But this is only half the job, because this whole knuckle assembly needs to come out, and this rear suspension arm needs to come out, the control arm, so that I can swap all of these bushings out, and then this one over here for a hard rubber bushing, which is what's already installed in this arm here. Rather than go with urethane, I opted for hard rubber because it's a little bit softer. It'll be a little more street friendly, because I do intend to drive this car both on the road and then to and from the track. So it'll be a little bit nicer to ride in for longer trips. But with the hard rubber, it'll still offer a little bit stiffer suspension and a little less compliance than you would get out of the factory parts. So first steps first is getting, well, the rest of this pulled apart, and then we'll go on and start replacing bushings. Yeah, pretty much carnage as far as the eye can see. Oh, okay, so this is, well, this is where I'm at currently. Man, where to start? Okay, so getting the lower control arm out wasn't much of a big deal. Getting the knuckle off, not a big deal. A huge pain, though, was removing this bushing from the arm. I ended up having to basically cut these ears off, and then forcing the middle out, and then collapsing the bearing and pushing the rest out. Getting the new bushing in was not too bad. You have to kind of fold this rubber lip inside first before pressing it in, otherwise you'll just cut this lip off of the bushing. But Honda does this thing where there's a flange here, and while that's really nice for pushing the bushing in, when it comes time to remove it, this is a huge pain in the ass, because normally when you use that kind of bushing removal tool, it's expecting to push on this edge, so you can either force the bushing out that way or force the bushing out the other way. Well, if you have this lip on here, you can't do either. You have to cut this lip off or bend it and mangle it up or whatever. It's just a huge pain, and I don't know why Honda does that, but they do this in a couple places on the car. So enough of that. Got the new bushing in. Got to put these guys in, but I want to make sure that they're all lined up right, so that when this arm is in, there's no preloader tension on these guys when it's at ride height, because that's the idea, is there's no tension on these rubber bushings at ride height. If you look at that one, it twisted a little bit when I was tightening everything up, but normally it should sit a little bit higher than that, because that's the position of this arm here when the car is at its ride height. When it's sitting on its own weight on the ground, there should be no tension in any of the rubber bushings, because however little these bushings, the torsion of those bushings actually adds to your spring rate on the suspension. Speaking of suspension, so here's the old units. I say old, but they're so well, basically fresh still. I don't think there's any real mileage on these. I think these were taken out of the car, replaced with whatever track suspension, and then before it was sold, they were put back in, because they still feel very good. They're really tight, like it's a brand new unit. These are what I'm replacing it with, though, and these are Fortune 510s adjustable shocks with the Swift Spring upgrade. I had to wait forever for these, you know, because of the holidays, because of COVID, etc., etc. But I will say, I think it was worth the wait. These are top-notch, high-quality shocks, and honestly, I was kind of surprised. I probably shouldn't be, but I was really impressed with the packaging, with the materials, and so far, just out of the box, the shocks are really, really good and include things that even high-end shocks don't include. Props to Fortune for kind of including all that stuff. Where I'm at now is I actually want to put these in the car, or start with this one side, and the goal is I actually want to drop the car by about 3 inches. The gap on the front wheel up there is not really indicative of, you know, normal wheel gap, but there's about 3 to 3.5 inches of wheel gap at stock ride height with the stock suspension. And what I want to do is eliminate most of that, still leave a little bit of wheel gap so that the suspension can still achieve most of the travel from factory, which is kind of what I'm hoping to do with these. Is they'll still offer the same amount of travel, but you can see that the mounting surfaces are quite a bit shorter, and that's just taking up the slack and then running a stiffer spring. So I'm gonna get this put in the car, and then we'll see if we can't get this guy bolted up to go with it. All right, here's one side completed. So this is the RSX Type S rear brake rotor. This is a StopTech rotor. We have Hawk HP Plus pads, hard race Camberlink upper mount. All of our bushings around the bottom here have been replaced with hard race hard rubber bushings. Even on this arm, which was previously replaced, uses a hard rubber bushing on the inside. That's probably the worst job of all of this, to be completely honest, is replacing those bushings. Got our damper installed, our coilover setup rather. So these are 10K springs for the rear, and that's because our motion ratio between where the shock picks up and then the actual outside of the wheel is quite a bit different than it is in the front. So the fronts are only 80K springs. But yeah, so this is the completed new setup. And then to go on this, I actually have 2 different sets of wheels. So I have these Buddy Club P1 F91s. So this is a 17x7 wheel, and they are currently shod with Toyo R888s. And then in the garage, I have a set of TE37s, which are a little bit wider. They're 17x8, and I believe those are in Yokohama rubber. I just don't want to dig them out right now. These are the safe bet, because these will fit on the car. They're inset a little bit. I can just put it on real quick. All right, and there we go. So already, just in full droop, we can see that the tire and whatever wheel gap on the fender is quite a bit smaller than it used to be. I'd say this is almost half what it is, just at normal ride height with the stock suspension. And then of course some of this is going to get taken up when the car is lowered on the ground. But the goal is to have about 1 inch showing between the top of the tire here and the fender. And that's the ride height I'm going for. And then of course having still full suspension travel on top of that. So the car will be lowered quite a bit, but the suspension itself will be still very usable. So for comparison, this side is all done. And if we look at the other side, this is the stock setup with the 4-lug, all the stock suspension components, etc. So this is basically what we're upgrading from. Again, sway bar's already done. The rear lower control arm link is already done, but everything else has to come back out. So lather, rinse, and repeat. I'll get that done, and basically that's it for the rears. So the rears are really the worst part of this, because I have to go through and redo all of the bushings now. On the fronts, I've already pre-done some of that work. If we look at these, I did some of the labor ahead of time, so new control arms, new bushings, etc. So this is all basically a bolt-in direct swap, and I don't have to worry about doing the same job with the bushings, pressing everything out. These are just straight bolt-in, so the front will go much quicker. And then underneath this pile, of course, is our TE37s, which we'll get to those later on, because I still have to trim up some of the rear fender well. So I did roll the lip here, as you can see, but in this area back here, there's a tab, and you have to trim this and trim this little area back here, because when the car squats down, this will rub against the tire, so you just have to trim that off, and then you end up zip tying the bumper to the body back here, and that's really the only way to get around that. So it's just happens to be where all this stuff meets up. I think that's going to do it for this episode on the EP3. I may bring you guys back for the front. I'm hoping that it goes quite a bit faster. There's also some work under the bonnet that I still got to finish up, which is getting that intake installed, and potentially the exhaust. So we'll just see how much I can get done with the car up on jack stands here in the driveway. I think that's going to do it for now. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.